Hello! Today I'm going to be reviewing He Who Fights with Monsters Book 8 by Chertalum. First of all, my overall score is a 3 stars. And I'm going to go into why now. So first of all, Chertalum is very well known in the Lit RPG series genre. He's a Patreon author, so he has a very high quality, fast publishing turnaround time. So he's writing constantly, which we have to take into context for this review. Okay. So he writes a lot, he writes fast, his editing times are tight, and he's got a specific type of audience who's used to a specific cadence of story. He's also trying to write a story that probably goes on for nearly forever because that's his income. So we're going to keep that in mind for this, right? So book 8, I'm not going to summarize it. Beyond saying this is a transitionary book. This book finishes some big action points in book 7, and it clearly is going to tie into the beginning of a new arc in book 9. It feels like connective tissue, and because it's connective tissue, it just doesn't have what the other books in the series have for a number of reasons, and I'm going to talk about those. So first of all, we're going to talk about characters. Chertalum does characters extremely well. I'm going to give characters a solid 4. Jason is Jason. The other characterizations in the book are honest and true to themselves. I feel like the book, it leans on a couple characters more than others, and those characters are well done. So nothing wrong with them. None of them particularly shine. Let me say that. Action. The book has a little bit of action in the beginning, and the action's done well, and there's good humor in it, but it doesn't particularly shine compared to the rest of the series. So the action is going to be maybe a 3. Next, progression elements. So in this book, how can I say this without spoiling it? In this book, Jason's progression changes from being about himself to being about a function of a subset of his powers, which is fine. But in doing so, it becomes more nebulous, less structured, and esoteric. It becomes very esoteric. So the progression, the meaning of the progression is going to tie into the story. I'm sure it's going to tie into what comes next in the subsequent books, but it doesn't feel like it fits the first 3 or 4 books in the series. It feels a little out of place. It's good, but it's not quite right for me, so I'm going to give that a 3. Prose and editing. Guys, this book is awful. Every single chapter begins with a rehash of the previous chapters. It's almost like the author didn't think about the fact that if we're consuming this book all at once, or we're consuming it over a couple days, we don't need him to tell us what he just said in the previous chapter. He could easily have cut this book in half, and it would have still read just fine. Like, this book is horribly written. The prose is okay. The prose is okay. It's pretty typical for Chertalum, but it needed some deep cuts for an Audible or, book reading audience. I'm going to give this a 2. Like, the editing was not there, or it was not written for the audience of someone who is consuming this in a sitting, as opposed to like rereading it and rereading it and reading it on Patreon. Virtue. How the book made me feel. I can see where the book is going to connect to the others in the series. I did not enjoy the book very much. It didn't really move me. It didn't really bring me back to what I loved about this series. The progression was vague. It's a connective tissue book. It's a 3, which is why the overall book is a 3. Would I recommend the series still? It's a great series if you're willing to kind of deal with the fact that Chertalum moves kind of from this kind of tight perspective where he's showing to this telling perspective where he spends entire chapters telling you what's happening without going into any detail. So if you're okay with that, I still recommend the series. So that's what He Who Fights with Monsters, Book 8, overall score of 3. What did you think? Or how would you rate it differently? How would you compare it to? Or what would you say I should review next? Thank you, and have a good day.